I'm Jasmine, 38 female. I live, or rather, I used to live, in a charming suburban house that I painstakingly renovated myself with my wife, Poppy. As a project manager, my life revolves around details, timelines, and ensuring complex systems run smoothly, a skill set that, I would soon discover, applied as much to my personal life as my professional one. This is the story of how I took the ultimate project, my own life, and executed a complete overhaul after being told I was worthless. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The barbecue was, in theory, a celebration of my father-in-law Frederick's 66th birthday. In practice, it was just another Sunday command performance at my in-laws' sprawling, perfectly manicured home. These gatherings always followed the same script. Frederick would hold court by the grill, talking about structural integrity and the shoddy work of modern builders. Sarah, his wife and a retired high school principal, would subtly correct everyone's grammar while offering unsolicited life advice. And Poppy, my wife, would float between them all, a social butterfly in her own family's ecosystem, her phone never far from her hand as she captured authentic family moments for her lifestyle blog. I, as always, was the stage manager. I had spent the previous day marinating the steaks, preparing the salads, and baking the ridiculously complex 7-layer cake that was Frederick's favorite. I had loaded the cars, coordinated the grocery runs, and made sure the cooler was stocked with the specific craft beer Harry, Poppy's brother, preferred. My role was to be the silent, efficient engine that made these perfect family memories possible. I was the planner, the organizer, the fixer. I was the family's dedicated, unpaid project manager, and for a long time I had convinced myself that this was a form of love. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the backyard. The air was thick with the smell of charcoal and freshly cut grass. Harry, holding his fourth beer, was telling a loud, boastful story about a recent crypto investment that had supposedly tripled his money overnight. He had the kind of unearned confidence that only a man who has never truly faced consequences can possess. "It's about seeing the patterns, you know," he slurred slightly, gesturing expansively with his bottle. "Most people are just sheep. They follow, but guys like me, we see the real moves." Frederick nodded approvingly. "Good head on your shoulders, son." I was clearing away empty plates, trying to remain invisible, when Harry's gaze landed on me. A cruel, lazy smirk spread across his face. He looked me up and down, taking in my simple jeans and t-shirt, smudged with a bit of barbecue sauce. In his eyes, I wasn't a person, I was a utility. "You know," he said, his voice loud enough for the entire patio to hear, "I was just thinking about Jasmine here." Everyone turned to look at me, and I froze, a stack of paper plates in my hand. "She's so quiet, always just doing things in the background." He took a swig of his beer. "Seriously, think about it. If you vanished tomorrow," he pointed the neck of the bottle at me, "no one would even notice. Life would just go on. The lights would stay on, the world would keep spinning. It'd be like you were never here." A beat of silence hung in the air. It was the kind of impossibly cruel comment that makes you suck in your breath, waiting for someone, anyone, to rush to the defense of the person targeted. I looked at Poppy, my wife of 10 years. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it embarrassment? Annoyance? It certainly wasn't outrage. She gave a tight, uncomfortable little laugh, a social reflex to smooth over her brother's crassness. And that little laugh was the spark that lit the fuse. It was followed by another sound. Frederick, my father-in-law, let out a deep chuckle. "He's got a point, you know," he said, clapping Harry on the back. "Jasmine's like the house's foundation. You don't think about it, but you'd be in trouble if it was gone." He meant it as a compliment, the most backhanded, ignorant compliment I had ever received. He was comparing me to concrete, unseen, unthanked, and buried underground. Then Sarah, the former principal, chimed in with a tinkling laugh of her own. "Oh, Harry, don't be mean. We'd eventually notice when the bills weren't paid." The laughter became general. It wasn't hysterical, but it was pervasive. a casual, easy agreement that my existence was purely functional. My value was measured in paid utilities, organized parties, and a smoothly running household. I wasn't a wife, a daughter-in-law, a sister-in-law. I was a service provider. I stood there, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. Every party I'd planned, every holiday I'd orchestrated, every late-night run to the pharmacy for them, every bit of financial advice I'd given that saved them thousands, every hour I'd spent listening to their self-absorbed dramas, it all flashed through my mind. I was the architect of the very comfort they were now using to mock me. I looked from face to face. Harry, smug and triumphant, Frederick and Sarah, smiling with the casual cruelty of the privileged, and Poppy, my Poppy. She was looking at her phone, already disengaging, perhaps already thinking of a caption for a photo of the sunset. She wasn't my defender. She was one of them. Something inside me, a tightly wound coil of resentment I hadn't even known was there, snapped. But my face remained calm. Years of managing difficult clients and high-pressure projects had taught me to keep a placid exterior, no matter the chaos brewing beneath. I slowly lowered the plates to the table. I walked over to the drink station, picked up my glass of iced tea, and turned back to the laughing circle. I raised my glass, my hand perfectly steady. I met Harry's gaze directly. "We'll see," I said, my voice even and clear. A small smirk played on my own lips. His laughter faltered for a second, confused by my reaction. He expected tears or anger or a hurried retreat. He didn't expect a challenge. The others quieted down, misinterpreting my tone as playful banter, a sign that I was a good sport. But Poppy knew me better. She finally looked up from her phone, a slight frown creasing her brow. She saw something in my eyes she hadn't seen before, not anger, not sadness. It was the detached, focused look I got right before launching a multi-million-dollar project. It was the look of absolute, unwavering resolve. I took a slow sip of my tea, holding their gazes for a moment longer, then turned and walked back into the house as if to get a trash bag. They resumed their chatter, the moment already forgotten by them. But for me, it was a declaration of war. A project had just been greenlit. Project Phoenix. And the first phase, demolition, was about to begin. That night, when we got home, I packed my things. Not all of them, just the essentials. My disappearance had to be as quiet and unnoticeable as they assumed my presence was. The drive home from the barbecue was suffocatingly silent. Poppy was in the passenger seat, scrolling through the photos she'd taken, occasionally humming a little tune. She was completely oblivious, cocooned in her digital world. For her, the evening was a success. Her family was happy, the food was good, and the sunset was Instagram-worthy. The casual, soul-crushing evisceration of her wife's worth was just a minor blip, a bit of awkward family banter already lost in the feed. I, on the other hand, was replaying that moment on a loop, the sound of their laughter. It wasn't just the sound itself, but the texture of it. It was thick with entitlement, with the easy confidence of people who have never had to question their own importance. It was the laughter of a pack, secure in its hierarchy, casually swatting down a lesser member who had forgotten her place. And Poppy's laugh, that was the one that echoed the loudest. It was a betrayal so profound it felt like a physical blow. In that single, airy chuckle, she had chosen them. She had chosen their comfort over my dignity. She had sided with the bullies, with her arrogant brother and her condescending parents, and had left me standing alone on an island of humiliation. When we arrived home, she breezed into the house, dropping her tote bag on the floor. "Ugh, I'm so full," she announced. "Your 7-layer cake was a hit, babe. Mom wants the recipe." "It's your grandmother's recipe, Poppy," I said, my voice flat. "I've made it for your family 17 times. Your mother has had the recipe for a decade." She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, right? Well, she lost it. Anyway, I'm going to go edit these pics for the blog, don't wait up." And just like that, she was gone, disappearing into her office, the little room I had converted for her with its perfect lighting and custom-built shelves. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone in the living room that I had designed, painted, and furnished. Every object in this house, from the reclaimed wood coffee table to the smart thermostat on the wall, was a product of my labor, my research, my time. This house was a testament to my presence, a detailed log of my efforts. And they thought I would not be noticed. The cold resolve that had settled over me at the party hadn't thawed. It had hardened into something crystalline and sharp. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I went into a state I knew well, planning mode. My mind, trained to break down massive undertakings into manageable steps, began to churn. The objective: execute a clean and total departure. The constraints: minimal drama, maximum impact. The timeline: immediate. I walked into our bedroom. Poppy and I had separate closets, a small luxe. Uri I insisted on for the sake of organization. I opened mine and began to pack. Not clothes, not yet. I packed the things that mattered. My personal documents: passport, birth certificate, social security card, my grandfather's watch. A small, fireproof safe box containing some emergency cash and the hard drives with all my personal and professional backups. I packed my laptop, my work phone, and a few sentimental items that were truly mine, untainted by my life with Poppy. As I moved silently through the house, I saw everything with a painful new clarity. I wasn't just a partner in this marriage, I was the infrastructure. I handled the mortgage, the investments, the insurance policies, the car maintenance schedules. I managed the digital ecosystem of our lives, the cloud storage, the streaming service passwords, the online banking portals. Poppy's blog, her sole source of income, ran on a web server I set up and maintained. Her brand was built on a fiction of effortless, aesthetic living, a fiction I worked tirelessly behind the scenes to support. She had no idea how any of it worked. When the Wi-Fi went down, she would call for me from her office like a frustrated child. When her laptop froze, she'd leave it on my desk with a sticky note. When a bill arrived in the mail, she'd place it on the kitchen counter, her silent instruction for me to handle it. Her helplessness was a choice, a luxury afforded to her by my competence, and I had allowed it. I had mistaken her dependence for intimacy, my service for love. Harry's words weren't just an insult, they were a diagnosis of a sickness I had refused to see. I went to my desk in the small home office I used. I logged into my personal bank accounts, transferring the majority of my savings, money I had earned and saved long before I met Poppy, into a new account at a different bank that I had opened a few months prior on a whim, a vague premonition that I might need an escape hatch someday. I left our joint account with enough money to cover the mortgage and bills for the next 3 months. It wasn't an act of kindness. It was a strategic decision. I didn't want the chaos to start immediately with a foreclosure notice. I wanted it to be a slow burn, a gradual realization of what they had lost. I wanted them to have time to feel the full weight of my absence. I logged out of every shared account on our home computers. I changed my passwords. I wrote a single, simple note and left it on the kitchen counter, right where she always left the bills for me. The note said, "You were right, no one will even notice. Goodbye." I packed a single suitcase with a week's worth of practical, nondescript clothing. I looked at the beautiful, curated life I had built, a life that looked perfect from the outside but was hollow at its core. I felt a pang of something, not sadness, but a strange, liberating emptiness. I was erasing myself from the equation. As I walked out the front door, I paused and looked back. The house was quiet. From upstairs, I could hear the faint, muffled sound of Poppy laughing, probably at some video she was watching while editing her photos. That sound, the very sound that had broken me just hours earlier, was now the soundtrack to my liberation. It was the final push I needed. I got in my car, the one that was in my name only, and drove away without looking back. I had no destination in mind, just a direction, away. Away from the laughter, away from the casual cruelty, away from the woman who slept in my bed and didn't see me at all. The project manager in me knew this was the riskiest project I'd ever undertaken, but the woman in me knew it was the only one that truly mattered. The world I had maintained for them could keep spinning. I was getting off. The first 24 hours were a blur of rain-slicked highways and anonymous motel rooms. I drove for 12 hours straight, fueled by coffee and a cold, burning anger. I put my personal phone in the glove compartment and turned it off. My work phone, a separate device with a separate number known only to my clients and my boss, remained on. I was disappearing from my personal life, but I had no intention of jeopardizing my career. My career was my own. It was the one part of my life I had never allowed Poppy's family to touch. The motel room was drab and smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner. It was a world away from the lavender and sandalwood scent of my carefully curated home. As I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, the adrenaline of the escape began to wear off, replaced by a profound and heavy sense of clarity. It was like a fog I hadn't realized I was in had finally lifted. Alone in the sterile silence, my mind began to do what it does best: collect data and identify patterns. Harry's insult wasn't an isolated incident. It was the logical conclusion of a decade of small, almost unnoticeable slights. It was the moment the subtext of my marriage and my relationship with my in-laws became the screaming, unavoidable text. I started connecting the dots, and the picture that emerged was ugly and undeniable. There was the time, years ago, when Poppy had won a local award for her blog. At the celebratory dinner, her father, Frederick, had stood up to give a toast. "To Poppy," he'd said, beaming. "She built this amazing career all by herself, with nothing but a dream and a laptop." I was sitting right there, the person who had spent countless nights teaching myself to code so I could build her website from scratch because we couldn't afford a developer. The person who had negotiated her first brand partnership. I had smiled and clapped along with everyone else, swallowing the bitter taste of my own erasure. There was the recurring joke about my job. Because I worked from home as a project manager for a tech firm, my work was deemed less real than theirs. "Still in your pajamas, Jasmine?" Sarah would ask during a mid-morning phone call, her tone light but laced with condescension. It must be nice to have a hobby that pays the bills. A hobby. I was managing multi-million-dollar projects with teams across 3 continents, but to her, if I wasn't in a classroom corralling teenagers, it wasn't a real job. Poppy never corrected them. She would just offer a sympathetic smile, as if to say, "What can you do? They're old-fashioned." Harry, his disrespect had always been more overt. He called me the warden because I managed our household budget. When Poppy would complain about not being able to afford some outrageously expensive designer bag, he'd say, "Just take the warden's credit card. What's she gonna do?" He treated my financial prudence not as a strength that kept us stable, but as a barrier to his sister's happiness. I was the responsible adult in a family of perpetual children, and they resented me for it. The most painful dots to connect were the ones that led back to Poppy. Her passive complicity was the thread that wove all the other instances of disrespect together. She would listen to my frustrations about her family, nod, and say, "I know, babe, they're just a lot, but that's just how they are." It was a statement presented as an explanation, but it was really a dismissal. It meant, their behavior is fixed. You are the variable. You are the one who has to adapt, to absorb, to endure. I remembered our last vacation, a trip to Italy that I had planned and saved for 2 years. It was supposed to be for us. On the 3rd day, Poppy got a call from Harry. He was in some financial trouble again, having made a reckless bet on a stock. Poppy spent the next 4 hours on the phone with him, walking through the streets of Florence not with me, but with her brother's latest drama. When I finally told her, my voice tight with frustration, that she was ruining our trip, she looked at me with genuine surprise. "But this is my brother," she'd said, as if that explained everything. "Family comes first." She had said it so easily. Family comes first. But I was her wife. Wasn't I her family? The chilling realization in that motel room was that I never had been. To them, and even to her, I was an accessory. A valuable one for sure. A high-functioning, useful accessory. But I wasn't one of them. I was an outsider who had been granted access to the family circle in exchange for my services. The barbecue wasn't the beginning of the problem. It was simply the day my contract came up for review and I was told my services were no longer valued. Harry's words, "If you vanished tomorrow, no one would even notice," were a performance evaluation. And my response, my quiet departure, was my resignation. I lay back on the stiff motel bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling. There was no grief. Not yet. There was only the cold, hard certainty of a project manager who has just reviewed the data and confirmed a critical system failure. The system was my marriage. The failure was total. My phone, my personal one, buzzed from inside the glove compartment. I had forgotten to power it down completely. I knew it would be Poppy. She would have come out of her office, seen my note, and her first emotion would not be worry but annoyance. Her routine had been disrupted. The Jasmine service was offline. I ignored it, let her wonder, let them all wonder. For 10 years, I had been the family's ever-present, endlessly reliable foundation. Frederick was right about that much, but he had forgotten something crucial about foundations. You only notice them when they're gone, because that's when the whole house begins to fall apart. And I had a feeling the first cracks were about to appear in their perfect, curated facade. My project was moving into its next phase, observation from a distance. The next few days were a masterclass in methodical self-extraction. My professional life became my anchor in the storm of my personal implosion. The morning after my departure, I logged on from a new, secure laptop in a quiet corner of a coffee shop 2 states away. I emailed my boss, a pragmatic and no-nonsense man named Arthur. I told him I was dealing with a sudden and serious family emergency that required me to relocate temporarily. I assured him my work would not be affected, that I was fully operational remotely, and that all project deadlines would be met. I just needed discretion. Arthur, a man who valued results over personal details, replied in under 5 minutes. As long as the work is done, I don't care if you're working from the moon. Let me know if you need anything from HR regarding a change of address. With my professional life secured, I focused on the logistics of my new existence. I was not a woman running away in a panic. I was a project manager executing a strategic relocation. I found a small, furnished apartment for a 3-month lease in a city where I knew no one, a place called Cedar Bluff. It was pleasantly anonymous. I paid the deposit and first month's rent with the money from my newly established bank account. The next step was to create a firewall between my past and my future. I bought a new phone and a new number. I systematically went through every online account I had, from social media to my ridiculously large collection of digital books, and changed the associated email address and phone number to my new, untraceable on. Ease, I left my old personal phone on, but silenced, tucked away in a drawer. I'd check it once a day, not out of longing, but for data collection. It was a listening device planted in the heart of my old life. The first few messages from Poppy were predictably annoyed. "Jasmine, where are you? This isn't funny. Your note is insane. Call me right now. Did you seriously leave? Over a stupid joke? My brother is an idiot, we all know that. Come home." There was no apology, no concern for my feelings, just anger that I had disrupted her world. It was exactly what I expected. After 2 days, the tone of her messages shifted. Annoyance was curdling into panic. "Okay, I'm getting worried. Where is the password for the electricity company? The power just went out in my office." "Jasmine, the blog is down. It says the domain subscription has expired. I'm losing money, call me." "I called your work and they said you're working remotely because of a family emergency. What is that supposed to mean? I'm your family." Each message was a small, satisfying confirmation of my hypothesis. They hadn't noticed me. They had noticed the interruption in their services. The foundation was gone, and the floorboards were starting to creak. Then the calls started coming from the rest of the family. Sarah, my mother-in-law, left a clipped, commanding voicemail. "Jasmine, this is Sarah. Poppy is very upset. Whatever point you think you're making, you've made it. It's time to stop this childish behavior and come home to your wife." Harry sent a text that was pure, unfiltered ego. "Yo, this stunt you're pulling is messing with Pop's business. Not cool. If you're trying to get an apology for the barbecue joke, fine, I'm sorry. Happy now, get back here and fix her website." It was breathtaking. The apology was a transaction, a means to an end. He was sorry not because he hurt me, but because my reaction was inconveniencing him. Frederick tried a different tactic, the disappointed patriarch. "We're all very concerned, Jasmine. This isn't like you. You've always been so dependable." Dependable. The word hung in the air like a conviction. I was dependable, and by leaving, I had broken the law of their universe. I never responded. Silence was my most powerful tool. My absence was my statement. While they were descending into a low-grade panic, I was building a new life. I set up my workspace in the spare bedroom of my new apartment. I established a new routine. Up at 6, a run by the river that cut through Cedar Bluff, work from 8 to 5, then an evening spent exploring my new city or taking an online course in data analytics, something I'd always wanted to learn. For the first time in a decade, my time was entirely my own. I wasn't planning menus or scheduling appointments for Poppy or researching the best deals on home insurance for her parents. The sheer amount of mental bandwidth that was suddenly freed up was staggering. I had been running a massive, unpaid, and unappreciated cognitive load for her entire family, and now that it was gone, I felt lighter, sharper, more focused. This was Project Phoenix. The first phase was the escape, the death of the old Jasmine. This second phase was the rebirth. I was rising from the ashes of their casual disregard. I started a new blog, an anonymous one, documenting project management strategies for personal life development. I wrote about setting boundaries, calculating the ROI of emotional labor, and strategically sunsetting toxic relationships. It was my work, but applied to the soul. It found a small but dedicated audience almost immediately. After a month, I made the final cut. I hired a lawyer in my old city, communicating only through email and video calls. I had her draw up divorce papers. The grounds were simple, irreconcilable differences. I gave instructions for Poppy to be served at her parents' house. I wanted them all to be there. I wanted it to be a family event. My lawyer also handled the sale of the house. Since I had made the down payment from my premarital savings and had meticulously documented every cent I had personally invested in the renovations, I was entitled to a significant majority of the equity. I instructed my lawyer to be firm, but fair. I didn't want to destroy Poppy financially. I just wanted what was mine. I wanted a clean extraction. The day the papers were served, my old phone exploded. It was a digital scream of outrage and disbelief. But by then, I was insulated from it. I was in Cedar Bluff, watching the sunset over the river, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The house of cards I had supported for so long was collapsing, but I wasn't in it anymore. I was free. The divorce papers were the earthquake. The weeks that followed were the aftershocks, each one revealing another layer of their dysfunction and utter dependence on the systems I had created. My lawyer, a sharp and efficient woman named Ms. Albright, provided me with periodic updates, painting a grimly satisfying picture of the chaos I had left behind. Poppy, predictably, fell apart, but it wasn't the emotional collapse of a heartbroken wife. It was the bewildered fury of a pampered child whose favorite toy has been taken away. According to Ms. Albright, the first meeting was a disaster. Poppy had shown up with her mother, Sarah, who had tried to take over the proceedings, treating the lawyer like a misbehaving student. "There must be some misunderstanding," Sarah had said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Jasmine is just being dramatic. She does this. You can just throw these papers away, and we'll tell her to come home." Ms. Albright, who had dealt with far more formidable opponents than a retired high school principal, had simply raised an eyebrow. "Jasmine has been crystal clear in her instructions. She has no intention of coming home. We are here to discuss the division of assets." The word assets was the trigger. Poppy's blog, her primary source of income and identity, had been offline for weeks. Her attempts to fix it herself had failed spectacularly. She had tried to hire a web developer, but she couldn't answer any of their basic questions. Who was the hosting provider? What were the server login credentials? Where were the domain registration details? She didn't know that I had all of that information organized in a secure, encrypted file that only I could access. Her business was a digital construct I had built and maintained, and without its architect, it was just a ghost in the machine. Her social media engagement plummeted. Her content, once filled with glossy photos of our perfect home and idyllic life, became sparse and erratic. Her followers started to notice. The curated illusion of effortless living is impossible to maintain when your life is genuinely falling apart. Then came the financial tsunami. The 3-month buffer I had left in the joint account ran out. The automatic payments I had set up started to bounce. First, it was the small things, the streaming services, the wine club subscription. Then, it was the big ones. A notice of default on the car payment, Poppy's car, a trendy SUV that was entirely in her name but paid for from our joint account. Then came the first warning letter from the mortgage company. Harry, the crypto genius, proved to be useless. His own finances, it turned out, were a house of cards. His big win he had bragged about at the barbecue had been followed by a catastrophic loss. He had no real money to lend Poppy. His advice was limited to just sell the house, as if it were that simple. Frederick, the retired engineer, was stumped by the complexities of modern finance. He understood concrete and rebar, not online banking portals and digital investment portfolios. He and Sarah had a comfortable retirement, but they weren't equipped to suddenly bankroll their 2 adult children, whose lifestyles had been subsidized by my income and management skills for years. They tried to fight the divorce settlement. They argued that Poppy's emotional contribution to the marriage entitled her to half of everything, including my personal savings and my 401(k)s. Ms. Albright calmly presented the prenuptial agreement I had insisted on, the one Poppy had signed without even reading, calling it unromantic. The prenup clearly delineated my premarital assets and earnings from my own business ventures. Their world, which had once seemed so secure and self-sufficient, was proving to be a fragile ecosystem that had depended on one key species, me. And now that I was gone, the ecosystem was collapsing. One afternoon, I got an email from an unknown address. The subject line was just my name. It was from Poppy. It was long and rambling, a stream of consciousness torrent of anger, confusion, and blame. How could you do this, Jasmine? How could you just leave? 10 years and you throw it all away because of one stupid joke? My family is a mess. My business is gone. The bank is threatening to take the house. This is all your fault. You were the one who handled everything. You set it up this way, you made me dependent on you, and then you just disappeared. You are a cruel, selfish person. I thought you loved me, but you just wanted to control everything. Well, you've won. You've destroyed us. I hope you're happy. I read the email twice. There it was, the ultimate, final act of gaslighting. I hadn't made her dependent. I had been competent. I hadn't controlled everything. I had taken responsibility. She had happily abdicated all of it so she could live her effortless life. She wasn't angry that I had left. She was angry that I had taken my labor with me. She didn't miss me, her wife. She missed me, her unpaid life manager. I forwarded the email to Ms. Albright with a single line, "For your files." Then I deleted it. I took my new phone, the one with the Cedar Bluff number, and went for a walk along the river. The sun was warm and the air was clean. My personal project management blog had just crossed 10,000 subscribers. I had a promising freelance offer to consult for a new tech startup in the city. I was making friends at a local hiking club. My world hadn't gone silent. It had just started to sing. Theirs was the world that had fallen into a deafening quiet, the silence of unpaid bills, of disconnected services, of a future that was no longer guaranteed. They had laughed when Harry said no one would notice if I vanished. They were right. The world didn't notice. But their small, selfish, fragile world had ground to a complete and utter halt. The sale of the house was the final crescendo in their symphony of chaos. Ms. Albright was a shark. She ensured the process was swift and legally airtight. The house, my beautiful, renovated house, was sold in less than a month to a young family who fell in love with the custom bookshelves and the landscaped garden. The distribution of the proceeds was a brutal reality check for Poppy. After the mortgage was paid off, my share, protected by the prenup and bolstered by my meticulous records of personal investment, was substantial. Hers was not. It was enough for a security deposit on a small apartment and perhaps a few months' rent, but it was a pittance compared to the lifestyle she was accustomed to. The life of a successful lifestyle blogger was over. Now, she was just a 36-year-old woman with a massive gap in her resume and no discernible job skills outside of applying Instagram filters. The family was forced to absorb her. She and her belongings moved back into her childhood bedroom at Frederick and Sarah's house. The updates from Ms. Albright had stopped, but I could picture the scene perfectly. Poppy, adrift and sullen, surrounded by the floral wallpaper and dusty tennis trophies of her youth. Sarah, her condescending nature now sharpened by constant frustration, micromanaging her daughter's half-hearted job search. Frederick, retreating into the silence of his workshop, unable to engineer a solution to his family's domestic collapse. And Harry? Oh, Harry's fate was a special kind of poetic justice. About 6 months after my departure, I saw a post on a local community forum from my old town. It was a warning about a local crypto guru who had taken money from several people for a guaranteed return investment scheme and then lost it all. The name at the center of the accusations was Harry. He hadn't just been gambling with his own money, he'd been gambling with other people's, too. His slick confidence had been nothing more than the bravado of a desperate, small-time con artist. Legal troubles were now circling him, and Frederick and Sarah were draining their retirement savings to pay for his lawyers. The irony was crushing. They had mocked me for being the warden, the boring, responsible one who managed budgets and paid bills on time. They had celebrated Harry's reckless, flashy genius. Now, my prudence had given me a new, independent life, while his recklessness was bankrupting the entire family. One evening, about a year after I had left, I gave in to a moment of curiosity. I created a fake, anonymous social media profile and looked up Poppy. Her public blog and professional accounts had been deleted or abandoned. Her personal page was still active, though rarely updated. I scrolled through the pictures. The vibrant, confident woman from the blog was gone. In her place was someone who looked tired and strained. The photos were no longer of exotic travels or chic restaurant meals. They were grainy selfies taken in a cluttered, unremarkable bedroom. There was a forced birthday post for her father, the 5 of them gathered awkwardly in the same backyard where my life had changed. They were trying to smile, but it didn't reach their eyes. The effortless charm was gone. All that was left was the effort. There was a photo of her with Harry. He looked gaunt, his smug grin replaced by a defensive scowl. The caption read, "Family is everything. We stick together no matter what." It was a desperate declaration, a mantra chanted against the encroaching darkness. The most telling post was a throwback picture from that vacation to Italy, a photo of the 2 of us smiling in front of the Colosseum. Her caption read, "Sometimes you don't know what you have until it's gone. Missing the good old days." The comments underneath were a mix of sympathy from her friends and confusion. "What happened to you two?" one asked. "I thought you and Jasmine were forever." Poppy's reply was a masterpiece of self-deception. "We just grew apart. People change." I had to laugh. We didn't grow apart. I grew up and she was left behind. I hadn't changed. I had simply stopped allowing myself to be used. The person she missed wasn't me. It was the good old days, the days when the bills were magically paid, the website ran flawlessly, and the path of her life was paved and maintained by someone else. She missed her invisible foundation. I closed the browser. I felt no anger, no sadness, not even a flicker of pity. I just felt detached. They were characters in a story I was no longer a part of. Their chaos was a storm on a distant shore, and I was safe in my harbor. I had spent a decade trying to earn their respect, hoping that if I just worked hard enough, was just useful enough, they would finally see me, finally value me. The punchline of the cosmic joke was that they were incapable of seeing anyone but themselves. Their laughter at that barbecue hadn't been about me at all. It was about them. It was the sound of their own self-satisfaction, the echo in their own bubble. By leaving, I hadn't just saved myself. I had held up a mirror to them, and they had shattered against their own reflection. They weren't forgotten by the world. They were simply forced, for the first time, to live with themselves, and they were discovering what a poor, chaotic, and empty house that truly was. 2 years have passed since the barbecue. I live in Cedar Bluff permanently now. I have a small, modern apartment that overlooks the river. It's clean, minimalist, and everything in it is mine. I was promoted to Senior Director of Project Management at my company. The consulting work I started on the side has grown into a successful small business. My personal development blog has become a book deal. My life is full, not with the frantic energy of managing others' needs, but with the calm, steady rhythm of my own ambition and peace. I no longer check up on Poppy or her family. Their story, for me, has concluded. The last I heard, through the grapevine of a mutual acquaintance who reached out, was that Frederick and Sarah had to sell their big, beautiful house to cover Harry's legal fees and mounting debts. He managed to avoid jail time, but was financially ruined and publicly disgraced. They now live in a small condo, their grand retirement replaced by a pinched and anxious existence. Poppy still lives with them. She got a job as a receptionist at a local dental office. The lifestyle she once blogged about is a fantasy as distant as the moon. She is, by all accounts, a bitter and unhappy woman, constantly complaining about the life she believes was stolen from her. The phrase, "if you vanish tomorrow, no one would even notice," has become a strange sort of mantra for me. Harry meant it as the ultimate insult, a declaration of my worthlessness. But he was spectacularly wrong. When I vanished, everyone noticed. They noticed in the unpaid bills, the broken website, the collapsing finances, and the sheer, overwhelming difficulty of adult life they had been shielded from. They noticed my absence in every corner of their unraveling lives. But the most profound impact of my vanishing was on me. By disappearing from their world, I finally became visible to myself. I was no longer just a reflection of their needs, a functionary in their family drama. I was a person, a whole person, with my own dreams, talents, and desires. Sometimes, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, I'll be sitting on my balcony, reading a book, a gentle breeze coming off the river. And I'll think back to the noise. The constant, clamoring noise of my old life. The endless demands, the unspoken expectations, the chorus of their laughter. I am not forgot. I am known, respected, and valued by my colleagues, my clients, and the new. Genuine friends I have made. I am the protagonist in my own life, not the supporting cast in someone else's. They are the ones who are forgotten. Adrift in the wreckage of the lives they took for granted, their world has shrunk to the size of their own resentments. No one is laughing anymore. There is only the sound of their silence, a heavy, bitter quiet filled with blame and regret. My silence is different. It's a beautiful silence. It's the silence of a well-organized life. It's the silence of a project completed, of a system running smoothly. It's the sound of peace. It's the sound of a woman who was told she was nothing and who responded by building everything. I raised my drink that day and said, "We'll see." And now we have.